much. Hi, everyone. I am Susan Walsh, the classification guru, fixer of dirty data, and welcome to my data den. This is where all the magic happens. I'm really excited to be talking to you about the dangers of dirty data in AI and machine learning and all data science things. And I am not quite like the other data kids, as they would say. I like to make the really boring task of cleaning data a bit more interesting and fun. So to give you an idea of how this presentation is going to go and what you can expect and what my content's like, here's a little teaser for you.
When you think of superheroes, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Men in tights? Women with superhuman strength? Capes? Lots of superheroes wear capes, but only one wears a coat. A data coat. By day, she's Susan Walsh, but when dirty data rears its ugly head, she becomes the classification guru. What are the classification guru's superpowers? Consistency, organization, accuracy, and trust. With help from her good friend and trusty sidekick, the data whisperer.
Hi, Scott.
The classification guru wages war against dirty data, fighting her sworn enemies, misclassification, duplicate, and the typonator. It's the classification guru's job to clean up the mean streets of Excel City.
That was bang out of order.
So, when you're in Excel hell, don't let dirty data get you down. Call the classification guru.
And so that's a little bit about what you can expect from this. And hold on to your hats because you will never think of dirty data in the same way again. So what are we going to do today? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, my background, how I ended up talking to you today. Then we're going to go into what is dirty data, because we're all working with different types of. Oh, there might be dirty data that you haven't even thought of before. And then we're going to talk about the consequences of that dirty data, because I think sometimes people think, oh, well, nobody will notice if I don't enter this in, or if this is wrong, nobody will notice. But actually within the organization, it can cause a lot of problems and make cause a lot of chaos for some people. And then I'm going to talk to you about how you can help ensure that data accuracy, because it's not good enough to just fix it. We have to keep it clean as well and accurate. And then I'm going to give you some tips to maintain and spot check your data in something as simple as Excel. It doesn't have to be a fancy tool. However, if you do want to use a fancy tool, we'll also talk about the options that are available. Finally, I will talk to you about my dirty data maturity model. And what is that, you're wondering? Well, you're just going to have to keep watching to find out. And then we'll summarize, and at the end, and if you are really lucky, there might be another video for you. So let's move on to a little bit about me. Who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I called the classification guru? Well, it didn't start out like that for me. I fell into data. I have a degree in commerce. I worked in sales in my 20s, account management, national accounts, account exec. And I realized actually that I was doing what I thought I should be doing rather than something that I really enjoyed. Except I didn't actually know what I enjoyed doing. So I decided to open a shop in Guildford, a women's clothes shop. It was beautiful, lovely clothes, but unfortunately nobody came in and nobody bought anything. And so I racked up a lot of debt in a short space of time. In about 7 months, I had no money. I could not even afford to go bankrupt because you have to pay to do that. So I needed a job desperately and quickly. I went online, I found an ad for a spend analytics company doing some data entry, data classification, and that really is where my love for data began. I found that I was really good at it, I really enjoyed what I was doing, and it came really naturally to me. And I was like, why didn't I know about this before? But after being there for 5 years, helping build and grow this business, I ended up managing a team of 14 people and running all the projects. I decided that it was time for a change, but because I hadn't come from a procurement or a data background, I didn't really know where I could get a job doing the same thing. I didn't even really have a proper job title. And I certainly wasn't a data analyst because I don't code in SQL or Python or anything else like that. So I was kind of at a crossroads again. And my options were, do I set up my own business and go through that whole trauma again? Or do I retrain and do something else? Well, the fact that I'm sitting here now as the classification guru, I think tells you that I decided to set up my own business. And I classification guru because I wanted, as part of my job, we have to Google a lot of businesses to see what they actually do. And you would be amazed at the number of companies that don't actually say what they do on their website. They'll say something like, we're the leaders in our field, we're experts at what we do, but they don't actually tell you what they do. And so I wanted to have a business name that really said what I did. And so that's where, and also I don't take myself too seriously, as you might have guessed. So I wanted something a bit fun. So that's where the classification guru came from. And I have managed to keep it going for 5 years now. It started with just me. I now have a team of 6 other people helping me. We have classified data across the world, across various different industries in many different languages. I have helped normalize and classify data. I have built customized taxonomies for some of the biggest companies in the world. And I have cleansed suppliers for P2P implementations, which is a finance system. And then I've also worked in CRM systems. So messy data where you maybe have multiple different sources coming together. They have to be deduplicated. They have to be cleansed. And there'll also be near duplicates like Rob Smith and Bob Smith. So you have to go through all that. So I can tell you now, I have seen the worst of the worst. I have seen it all, and I'm here to share my experience with you. And how can I forget? It's classifying and fixing dirty data. And the reason that I did this was because I find that there are very few resources out there for people who want to learn how to clean data. Yes, there's courses on how to do it in Python, R, etc. But what if you don't have that? What if you've only got Excel? There's very little out there. And in the procurement space, there's not much either. So this is the book I've written. And that is where the dirty data maturity model comes from, which I will tell you more about later. I'm also proud to say that I was listed as one of DataIQ's 100 most influential people in data this year. A huge personal achievement for me, especially because I haven't come from a data background. So to be acknowledged by my peers has been really special. And I guess it means I do actually know my stuff. But that's enough about me. What about you? What do you think dirty data is? Why don't you pop some information in the chat and tell me what your experiences have been. And while you're doing that, I will take you through some of the things that I think dirty data is. In fact, I know, I don't even think I know. So the first thing is misspelt words. So you will see this in company names, people's names, invoice descriptions, product descriptions, any description columns. People have this natural ability to misspell things. And I've seen hotels and taxis, some of the worst spellings you've ever seen. Freight, carriage, it's amazing. Well, it's not amazing, but it blows your mind. And the fact that people don't notice it either is even more terrifying. And then there's things like descriptions. And how do they happen? Well, generally it's because somebody's copied and pasted something and they haven't realized that when they've copied, it hasn't copied properly. This is a perfect example of a car tagged as a horse. And this happens more than you think. Next, there are things like missing codes. If you work for a manufacturer, each product needs a code. So important to have these codes so that you can send out products to your customers or manufacture more of products. You might need certain parts to go into a certain product or certain parts to fix machinery. And maybe you haven't assigned a code to it, and then you think you don't have any of those items, and actually you do. They're just sitting in a corner of the warehouse without a code assigned. So it can cause a lot of financial burden, but also like space in terms of if it's a warehouse, it's taken up, space that is generally quite valuable. And then data in the wrong columns. I see this so often with addresses mainly. You'll have like address 123 and then city, county and postcode. And guess what? Somebody's put the whole address in one cell, or you see the city and the county or the zip postcode column, and it's all over the place. And it can be quite messy to tidy up. So I pretty much see that in every data set that I have. And, do you use commas to separate the addresses or do you not, which we'll come on to. But also in this increasingly global business community that we work in, there's no standard units of measure. We spell meters here in the UK, different to Europe and the US. Are we talking in meters or are we talking in inches? Or is it kilometers, kilometers, or miles? There are so many different ways that we can measure things, and depending on where you're from, you'll use a different unit of measure. That can cause multiple entries in systems. And it's the same with currency issues. I can tell you my currency conversions have gone horrifically wrong. How do I know this? Well, when I've been classifying some Swedish data, the taxes were all at the value of around $500. Now, because I classify data a lot and I work with data, I know that normally the average taxi cost is between £5 and £50. Anything more than that is very unusual. So to have several for one file, we knew something was wrong. Sometimes there could be like a miscommunication in data and values when you're talking to other areas because you're not all talking in the same currency, and that can cause problems within itself. And then one of my other favorites, formatting issues. What I'd like you to do right now is type in the chat box how you format your date. And what you will see scrolling through the list right now is many different versions of date formatting, whether it's day, month, year, month, day, year, or day, month spell out in year, and whether it's separated by a dash, a slash, or a dot. There are so many different ways we can format dates. And what that means is that you might not be able to match documents, legal documents, financial documents, which could cause problems. In procurement, it would be, invoices and things like that might not match. It can, if you're trying to look for something and you don't know that the date's in a different format, then you might not be able to find it. So it can cause a lot of problems. And we were talking about addresses before, formats like, do you have commas at the end of each line? Do you have like abbreviations? Is it street or ST? Do you have a full stop after that or not? All these different things, you see so many different versions of the same address in the data. And of course, all of those things add up to duplicates, our good old friends, and they are in every single data set that you see. And sometimes I think it's inevitable that they'll be there, but I certainly think we can help minimize having so many. Now, what about examples of dirty data? In my world, it's spend data classification. So that's what I'm going to share with you. And the first thing that I want to share with you is context of data. This is LinkedIn, a well-known social media, networking, training, recruitment platform. And someone that I was working for me classified it as a restaurant. And why did they do that? Because the description said so. They looked at a single piece of information, one single cell, without using the context of the data. They should have looked at the supplier name, and they probably should have looked at the other rows as well. It's really important not to focus in on one cell, but to look at all the data around you. That's how I knew about the taxes that I was telling you about earlier. And the other example that I want to share with you is never assume that you know something. Always check and use that context of data to double check. So here's Tinder Corporation. And this was classification for a charity here in the UK. And I thought, there's no way that they're going to be paying Tinder for anything, not even advertising. They wouldn't want to be, this charity would not want to be associated with Tinder. The logic told me that. And I could see that the description said additional data cabling. And so I went and did some checks on Google, and after some thorough Googling, I found out that there's a Tinder Corporation Limited here in the UK, which is an IT services company. So it just highlights the fact that you should never just assume that you know something, because it could really catch you out. Some more examples of multiple versions of the same address. We've got Saint abbreviated and unabbreviated, and the same with Centre. We've got that. And also, if this was in the UK, we'd have that spelled, or Europe, we'd have Centre spelled potentially a third way. This comes up in data all the time. And this is a supplier list. So you can see there's already like several versions of the same supplier. You only need one. This should not be here. But you know, it's not just that, it's normalization as well. I normalize a lot of suppliers before we even classify, because as you can see, you get multiple versions of the same supplier. However, I made a mistake with this one. I assumed, and I got it wrong, because there's actually two Grangers. There's one in the US that supplies hardware, and there's one in the UK that is a house builder and landlord. Again, had I used the context of the data around me, I would have known that, because the descriptions would have told me, and I wouldn't have made this mistake. But I make a mistake once, and then I learn, and I try not to make it again. And of course, it's really easy for me to sit here and show you a couple of examples. You know, it's really easy to spot them when they're on their own like that. But when you are looking at rows and rows and rows of data in Excel or in a tool, it can be really hard to spot these things. So I'm going to give you some tools and tips to actually be able to pick this out that will be easier for you later on in this session. So how can we prevent any of this? Well, first of all, I'm going to say it again, please do not assume that you know what something is. Look at your name and your vendor and your description and the value and even dates. You know, if you've got a customer or a product in your organization and the date says 1980, you're going to know something's wrong, because we probably didn't have the tech for that product in 1980. Use that data to guide you. And then think about, would the company that I work for use this product or service? Would we sell this to this customer? Does this make sense? And then look at those values to guide the classification. When I am classifying hotels, normally if anything is over £5,000 to £10,000, I would classify that as a venue hire or events-based spend rather than accommodation, because normally you wouldn't see that much in the accommodation side. And then Google, like Googling is a legit skill. I do it all the time. I'm queen of Googling. It can tell you so much, but again, just be careful. You know, we classify for a lot of different languages and countries. If we're looking for we have to be careful on Google, because Google will bring back the companies closest to us. So for example, Tinder again, it brought back, it brought back the most familiar Tinder, but actually we had to go like Tinder UK, and then we found it. And, you know, if there was Tinder in France, we might have to type in Tinder France to find it. You have to make sure that it's the right one. And you can do that by checking that the website you're looking at matches the information that you have in your data. Why should we bother? I mean, everyone knows about it. What's the point? Why is it my responsibility? Well, guess what? You are going to save time fixing dirty data if you clean it up and maintain it. How many hours or days, if not weeks, have you spent fixing things or pulling reports together and trying to make everything match and get the numbers to add up? All that could disappear, or most of it, if we just keep our data clean. And it can be really costly to fix problems. You might have to get someone in like myself. Not that I'm saying I'm super expensive, but it could be quite costly. And because you might not have the time to fix it yourself, it might take months, whereas you might need it fixed quicker than that. And it's going to affect decision-making processes. If you are reporting information further up the business, like how much of this did we produce? How much of this did we buy? How much of this did we sell? If you get that wrong, that could affect things like your bonus, the future of the company, headcounts, redundancies, all those whether you get a pay rise, all those kinds of things. So it's really important. And then there's things like fraud and risk management. Increasingly, we need to be responsible as businesses on who we do business with. We need to know that the people we're working with are not breaking any modern slavery laws, they're using sustainable products, and they're not in breach of any GDPR regulations. How are we going to do that? We need clean data so we can do searches on them. Otherwise, we're not going to find that out. And it could be regulatory issues as well. So you need to, especially in a finance world, you need to have those numbers and that information as accurate as possible. And again, I touched on GDPR. It's not good enough just to save and protect that data. You have to keep it accurately as well. You have to just have the information you need. So if you only need a name, address, and an email, that's all you need, but make sure that it's right. And then there's reputational damage. What if you do breach those GDPR rules? What if you are doing business with somebody who is using slave labor? That could be far more damaging than some dirty data that you need to fix. So it's much better to tackle this up front and deal with the problem. And let's face it, dirty data makes your life more difficult. Who wants that? We all want an easier life. We've all got enough to do already. Most of us are overloaded in our jobs. Let's try and make it a little bit easier. And, you know, this is all doom and gloom here. It can be hard to even get your business or your organization to get on board with the clean data kind of ethos and philosophy. Well, guess what? It also increases profitability, because if you're taking half the time to work on a project, that's more profit for your business. Is that potentially a bonus or a pay rise for you? I don't know, but it certainly would help contribute to your targets. It's definitely motivational, and it's what we should be using to try and drive that awareness within the rest of the business. And of course, then there's the consequences. So what actually happens if we keep the dirty data? Well, first of all, cost savings. In the procurement world, you could be making far more cost savings if you have the right data, because you'll have enhanced supplier negotiations. If your supplier has a data set and you have a data set and they're different, and your supplier's is correct and yours isn't, your supplier could be taking advantage of you, and you don't want that. And then supplier rationalization. I showed you supplier normalization there. You might have 20 versions of PwC in your system, when actually, and you think you've got 20 suppliers, but actually it's only one supplier. So by doing that, having clean data, that will help. And it will help with things like forecasting as well. You know, imagine if dirty data is wrong and someone's put an extra 0 or 2 on manufacturing something. Suddenly you have all this stock in the warehouse that you didn't need because nobody spotted the extra 0. And then suddenly sales and marketing have to come in and run a promotion and you lose money on that product. It has a knock-on effect. And same with budgets. You know, you've got, if you want to get the best budget for your department within your organization, make sure your data is right. And then it's hitting the right customers. If your CRM system is not up to date and you are mailing out letters or promotional materials or even samples to people, you want to make sure that you're actually sending them to people who still live at that address, people who are interested in your products, and people who are going to use it. Don't waste your money. Like, imagine if 20% of your database was wrong and you sent all that out. What a waste of money. And then, of course, shipping the correct product as well. If we have those missing codes or wrong codes, we could end up sending the wrong product to a customer. And then the cost of having to ship that back, replace it with another one, it's going to be quite high. And if you multiply that by hundreds or thousands of products, then you're going to have a problem. But it's not just those things, it's analytics as well. So have a look here at these suppliers. We've got a whole range, and some of them are the same, but slightly different. Once I normalize those, if you look at the values just now, the highest value there is 75,000. Look at that. Once we normalize them, there's only 4 suppliers, and that value goes up to 185,000. Imagine the difference that some decisions you're making on things could be between 75 and 185,000. And it doesn't have to be sales. It could be units of measure, production rates, forecasting, whatever. But what kind of difference would that make when you're making decisions based on the wrong data? And then there's technology implementation as well. Data cleansing is often neglected before we implement new tools. The errors are only discovered post-implementation, and then staff lose faith in this tool. They're disengaged, they claim it doesn't work, they go back to their siloed spreadsheets because they don't trust it. It's wrong, I'm not going to use it, not going to use it. And you can spend some money to try and fix those problems further down the line, but they're going to cost at least twice as much as if they had at the beginning. And you're going to have to hope that staff will then adopt that technology, because if not, that project's going to be abandoned. And I've heard stories of, millions of dollars of projects getting scrapped because the data wasn't right. It's absolutely terrifying. And then there's AI, machine learning, and automation. Now I'm preaching to the converted here, but as I always tell everyone I talk to about this, you have to clean and prepare your data beforehand. AI is learning from training data sets. That means it needs to have clean training data sets. And how are you going to do that? You're going to need people who have knowledge in that area to know that the data is right. As well as that, it's the same for ML. It's, if you're basing it on bad data, you're going to get bad outputs. It's really true what they say. It's rubbish in and rubbish out. He's not happy at all. Now, there are ways that you can help minimize that dirty data. You can help to ensure your data accuracy. The first thing I think we all need to realize is, guess what? There is no quick fix. There is no magic button. There is no software in the world that is going to fix all of our data problems. The reality is sometimes you just need a person to look at it, particularly new data. Preferably somebody with an expert in that specific data set, but just getting some eyes over it really helps. And get your whole organization involved in this, because it is not one person or one department's responsibility to look after the data. It's all our responsibility to manage that data, because sales and marketing are putting information into the CRM system. The receptionists might be inputting information on people who've called in. You've got people who are inputting product informations. I've heard stories of product dimensions being set up wrong for televisions. They were set at 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter instead of 1 meter by 1 meter. And so the system thought it could fit hundreds of TVs on a truck, and actually it could only fit 100 of that. So it can cause all kinds of knock-on problems. And standards, I've heard of stories where the customer is different within an organization depending on which department. If you're finance, maybe your customer is the business. But if you're in sales and marketing, your customer is an external party. So agree and define those terms, those processes, and make sure everybody's on the same page. And my not so secret sauce tip is maintain and refresh that data, update it when new data comes in regularly. It will make things so much easier for you. And once you start to look at your data regularly, you'll start to become familiar with it. So things that don't look right will stick out quite quickly. And also spot check your data regularly, because guess what? Just because you fixed that and it was right 6 months ago doesn't mean it's still right today. Someone could have accidentally deleted something, they could have cut and paste over it, or they could have had a difference of opinion and just changed it. So you want to go back and check and make sure everything is still consistent. And the way that I like to get people to remember how to do this is to say, make sure your data has its coat on. So like a jacket. Do I do that? Well, I want everyone in the organization to remember this. I want everybody to be on the same page, and I want everyone to feel like it's not too intimidating and it's relatable. So first of all, make sure that data is consistent. Those standard terms, processes that everybody understands and is working to. If everybody's working the same way, there's a much better chance that you will have less errors. and get that data organized, classify it, categorize it, do it by region, by country, by division, by month, by year, by industry, however you need to categorize it, have it ready so that when someone comes to you and says, how much did we buy with Dell in the UK this year? You can just go, all right, let me just have a look for you. And the information is there. It makes your life so much easier. And of course, it goes without saying your data has to be accurate. I don't think we need to say anything more on that. But once you've got those three things, the consistency, the organization, and the accuracy, you then have trustworthy data. You can talk to your senior management in your organization or your boss, and you know that the information that you have is as accurate as it can be. You are making the best business decisions. You are running the best models because you know your data is accurate. And the thing about data quote is it's not a seasonal thing like summer. You have to keep it on all year round. It's that maintenance and that spot checking that will keep the data quote on, regardless of how warm it is outside. Now, that's great, Susan, you think? You've told us lots of stuff, but you know, that's just not practical for us to do that. I'm going to show you something in Excel. I'm going to tell you now, it's not the easiest way, but it is an option. Sometimes people ask me, how can you do this with large volumes of data? Because obviously Excel can't handle massive millions of rows of data. If you have an insanely huge amount of data, you can still do this. There are a couple of different ways you can do it. If it's because you've got a lot of columns and you don't need them all, put a row ID in column A and number each line, like, you know, number 1 to 1 million or whatever it is. Copy that data into another tab, worksheet or file, delete the columns you don't need, work with the columns you do, and then you can use a VLOOKUP to put that updated data back into your original data set. Another way to do it is put it in a pivot and aggregate it so that you're only looking at an aggregated version, and then you can use a VLOOKUP to put that back in at the end. So there are ways. If that's still not enough, you could do things like split it by country, region, etc., to try, or year, to try and reduce that number and that volume. So let's get on with this. So this is Excel. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. In this pivot table, I have normalized supplier name and 4 levels of classification. What I'm going to do is create a tabular form table, and that's going to have everything going across that way so it's easy to read, not all the way down. Going to remember to take away all my subtotals. And obviously this is a lot to follow up, so I can pass on some handouts that will be available if you want to keep a copy of this afterwards as well. Once I've removed the subtotals, I can then start to see and look for anything that's not quite right. So in this instance, I'm scrolling down and I can see actually some suppliers have one classification against them. Some have multiple, which could be right, is legitimate. However, I don't think Dell is providing courier services. So I'm going to want to change that. And I'm going to need to flip into my raw data tab, change it, and then flip back into my pivot table, scroll down, find something else, flip back into the other one, and it's going to take a while. Now, regardless of whether you have one screen or multiple screens, this is a tip I have for you. If you go to New Window, click Arrange All, choose vertical. Depending on the type of data, you might want it horizontal, but try to test it out. And then look, ta-da, you'll have two spreadsheets the same. And then what you'll do is you'll have your pivot table on one, and then you'll have your raw data on the other. And what that means is you can scroll down the pivot, look for anything that's not right, and then you can flip over to the raw data, change it, and then you can flip back your pivot table, and you can click on refresh all, and it will update the data, which means you're not constantly going over the same wrong data to find the new wrong data. So it makes it a little bit more efficient in how you work. And you can do this a number of different ways. You might want to add some information in. So in this case, I wanted to know the description as well, because there's companies like Staples or Ryman's, where you might want to check the detail is there. So in this example for breaks, we've got apples, bananas, etc. In this instance, it's just classified as food and drink, but some clients would like the apples, the bananas, the beef, the beverages to be all classified out. So that's another way of checking it's classified. Something else that you can do is do keyword searches. So like hotels, taxis, solicitors, etc., to make sure it's classified, categorized. You can do this with any type of data that you're looking for. You might, it could be numerical data, and you might want to scroll. There might be a code and some numerical data. You can still look at it and look for patterns to see if something doesn't look right. And then there's the flipping it around as well. So maybe you don't want to look at the supplier first. Maybe you want to look at the category and then look for anything that sticks out. So in this instance, DHL is under facilities. It probably wants to be under logistics. Think about looking at your data. I mean, I try to look at my data back to front and sideways as well, just to try and pick out as many errors as possible. And I still never get them all, but the ones that are left are so minimal that most of the time nobody notices them, but shh. So that's Excel. We know it's cumbersome. We know it doesn't like large sets of data. We know it can crash. We know it can do all those things. There are a number of different tools that you can have a look at, where you probably have to do the checking in the visualization tool, and then you probably have to change the raw data. So it's not quite as smooth, but it is possible. And again, I've showed you through analytics as well that you can spot things through charts and visualization. So it doesn't just have to be pivot tables. My tool of choice is Omniscope, which is down the bottom there. I like to call this Excel on steroids. And it's a data visualization and data modeling tool. And it's got everything in one. It's the only one I know of that does it all in one. And I absolutely love it. But it's, it's kind of like, I think it's the best kept secret around. And that's what my team and I all use. I've developed my own methodology to clean and classify data in there. So that is, and also I would say, like, a question I get quite a lot is, which tool should I use? And the answer is that different people like different tools or different methods. This might not be the method for you that I've showed you, but you could take the principles of it and apply it to another area of what you're doing. Next, I am going to move on, and I'm going to take you to the dirty data maturity model. Now, I don't know if you have much experience of working with consultants, but what I can tell you is that they have these maturity models, and they're all these fancy grids with big fancy words and don't really mean anything. And I'm all about making, explaining data and working with data really accessible. And so I want to do something that everybody in an organization can understand, not just the senior management or the experts. And so I created this model. Started, and you can plot out where you are on the dirty data maturity model yourself, but it's not what you're expecting, I can promise you that. So first of all, here's dirty data. It's a pile of stinky clothes on the floor. It is the worst data you've ever seen. It is in silos, it's in multiple spreadsheets, it's never been checked, it's inconsistent, it does not have its coat on. In fact, I like to describe it as the equivalent of turning your underwear inside out and wearing it for an extra day. You shouldn't do it, but you can probably get away with it. And then one day you do it and you end up in an accident and you go to the hospital and you get found out. And having dirty data is very much like that. Most of the clients I work with are not proactive in fixing their data. It's normally that some massive catastrophe has happened within the organization, and that's how they've managed to get funding to fix it. Unfortunately, that's the way things are at the moment. I am working really hard to try and fix that. And this model is one of those things. But it's basically nobody's doing anything with the data. There's probably not anyone specifically associated with it. They're certainly not using much tech. It's going to be really basic. But the great thing about this model is you can apply to your own organization what you would put in each bucket as well. So if you want to go to your senior managers who don't know anything about the tech talk, they just want to know what's going on, you can say, look, here's our model, this is our data, we need to be here. So that's my plan on how to use this. So D-class data is next. So look, we've started to organize it. Maybe we've got some software, maybe we're doing a little bit of cleaning. We're probably still using Excel. Maybe not much categorization or cleaning going on, and it's not looked at regularly. If we want to improve, we want to get to distributed data. So we're categorizing things, we're tidying things, and we might only be doing it once or twice a year, but hey, it's improving. We maybe even have an analyst working, maybe a little software tool if we're really lucky, and maybe some analytics as well. But what we really want to get to is disordered data, because then we might be using some AI at this point. We might even not have siloed data. It might all actually be in the one place. So we can have the data caught on, it can be consistent, it can be organized, it can be accurate, it can be trustworthy. We might have multiple analysts. We might have lots of people checking it, and we might even be checking it monthly or quarterly. But we're not quite there. It's almost there, but not quite. We want to reach the pinnacle. We want to reach dirt-free data. Now, the reality is dirt-free data exists for about 1 second in time. So this is really a realistic view would be to be as dirt-free as you can get it. And that is when everything is smooth, you have the whole organization on board, everyone's working together to keep that data organized and clean and tidy. And we're using the best tools. We've got some great automation. And we're having the minimum amount of human input, which will cause the errors. So that is the dirty data maturity model. I hope you can take that away with you and, use that in your organizations to say, look, we're here, we need to be here. And if you want to know about it more detail, of course, it's in Between the Spreadsheets, shameless plug there. In the book, this goes into more detail on everything we've covered today. It's also got a data horror stories chapter, which I absolutely love. People from LinkedIn anonymously donated their data horror stories, and they are in the book. So there's some real great lessons to be learned from that. And we are coming to the end of our session. Where has the time gone? I hope you've had fun. I know I have. It's been an absolute pleasure, but I'm going to reiterate to you again how accurate data is critical. There are no shortcuts. You cannot cheat the system when it comes to clean data. Know and maintain that data regularly. Now, depending on the volumes of data you have, it could be monthly, quarterly. I certainly wouldn't leave it any more than 6 months. You have to keep it going. And agree those common standards, terms, and processes. Make sure everybody's working the same way. I have a team. I use this with my team all the time. We have documents on our processes, how-to videos. We have regular training sessions to make sure everyone's on the same page. And get everyone with my team. It's a team effort. We all have to take care of our data, and we all have to take responsibility for it. And of course, you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say, make sure your data has its coat on. It's so important. This will help you so much, especially if you're building models and things, because that data has to be clean in the first place. But if you need a little prompt and reminder of what coat is, then here's something for you.
Are you leaving your data out in the cold? You wouldn't go out into sub-zero temperatures without the correct protection, so why do so many companies forget to protect their data? Unprotected data can lead to bad business decisions that cost money and put jobs at risk. That's why your data needs its coat on. This means making sure your data is consistent, organized, accurate, and trustworthy. Consistent means using the same standards, terms, and classifications company-wide. Organized data makes it easier to find. Think of it like a messy closet. It can be difficult to find what you're after, even when you know it's in there. When organized correctly, it becomes easier to find what we want. Data should be accurate, which can mean different things to different people, but at its most basic level, accurate data is correct. And finally, data should be trustworthy. This is critical. If your team can't trust the data, they might not use it. And business decisions around jobs, staffing, and budgets are all based on data, so it's got to be right. Like any code, there are differences in the quality of data services out there. If you buy a cheat coat, it might not be waterproof or protect you enough, and it won't last more than one season. If you don't invest in good quality data services, you will end up paying twice as much, if not more in the long run, to fix the earlier mistakes. If you'd like to speak to an expert about data in your own business, visit theclassificationguru.com to find out more.
And that has been my presentation. I have been Susan Walsh, the Classification Guru. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. That is my QR code. That is where I hang out the most. I also have my email and website if you have any questions or want to get in touch. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy the rest of the festival.